Pixel phones are always my go-to when it comes to photos, plus the improvements Google did this year made me more curious to compare the 10 Pro XL against the all-new 17 Pro Max, to see if Pixel phones still hold the crown when it comes to photos, or Apple has another opinion. To answer this question, let's do an in-depth camera comparison. Let's start with the morning photos. After comparing hundreds of shots in many places and different scenarios, here is what I've learned about each camera. The first category is the landscape shots, and the first lens is the ultra-wide. The 17 Pro Max most of the time produce blown-out highlights, so you barely see the color and texture of the objects in these areas. And it's not a one-time thing, but it happens frequently. On the other hand, the 10 Pro XL does a much better job in keeping the shadows and the highlights well balanced, which allows me to see every single detail without a problem. So the Pixel wins in the HDR performance. The second issue I spotted in the 17 Pro Max's photos is the over-sharpening. When you look at the things far away from the camera, you will notice how over-sharpened the images are. It does this at the 12 and the 24 megapixel resolutions, while the Pixel images look as detailed while keeping the same natural look. But this doesn't apply to the high-res 50 and the 48 megapixel photos, as the iPhone images have better details in this scenario. Besides this, both will give you great looking photos, but the Pixel has more vibrant colors unlike the muted look of the iPhone. It depends on your personal taste which one you like more, but to me the 10 Pro XL images are more true to life, while the 17 Pro Max's images look brighter and washed out. Overall, in the morning ultra-wide photos, the win goes to the Pixel for the better HDR most of the time and the more natural details at lower resolutions, while the 17 Pro Max was only better in the details at 48 megapixel. Moving to the main camera, the iPhone's HDR improved. Some parts that used to be blown out in the ultra-wide photos are now better exposed. That makes it closer to the Pixel, but it's not quite there yet. The Pixel still wins this area most of the time. When it comes to the details, I found that the iPhone images are heavily processed from the 12 megapixel all the way up to 48. At the first glance, the iPhone images look more detailed, but when I look closely, I don't see the same natural blur the Pixel adds to the background. It seems like the iPhone processes the image to make it look sharper, but it loses the natural look I see in the 10 Pro XL images. To show you what I mean, look at these examples. In this high-resolution shot, the text is clearly visible in the 10 Pro XL's image, unlike the iPhone. You can also see the small gaps between the wood sheets in the Pixel's image which don't even exist on the other side. Similarly, when you look at the floor tiles, you can see the texture in the Pixel shot, unlike the iPhone that smoothed out the surface. In the second example, at 24 megapixel versus 12 on the 10 Pro XL, you can see how the chandeliers, the buildings, and text are over-sharpened in the iPhone's image. I certainly go for the more natural details of the Pixel, plus its high-res mode is the superior in every single photo I took. One more thing to compare is the optical quality 2x zoom on both. The first thing I noticed is the Pixel's 2x photos are more zoomed in. Also, the iPhone is limited to 12 megapixel in this mode, while the 10 Pro XL can still shoot at 12 or 50 megapixel at this zoom level. Starting with the 12 megapixel versions on both, thankfully the 17 Pro Max's photo doesn't look over-sharpened, but the Pixel is a tiny bit better in the details. And when I switch to the high-res mode on the 10 Pro XL, it takes the details to a whole new level that the iPhone cannot match. And here's another one to show you how much better is the Pixel's 50 megapixel mode at 2x. It's a day and night difference. Finally, when it comes to the looks, it's the same as the ultra-wide lens. The Pixel has more saturated colors, more contrast, and well-balanced highlights. To me, it looks more true to life when compared to the iPhone, but either way, both produce some great-looking images, and it depends on your personal taste which one you prefer. Overall, in the main camera, the win goes to the Pixel for the better HDR, more natural details, and sharper high-res photos, while the iPhone is better in showing more details at the lower resolutions, but at the cost of an over-sharpened look in most cases. So far, the 10 Pro XL won in the ultra-wide and the main camera. Now let's talk about the telephoto. Right off the bat, the 10 Pro XL photos have more accurate colors and white balance. The iPhone photos look edited as if I'm applying a filter on them, even though it's set to the standard photographic style. So it depends on your personal taste here, but the 10 Pro XL is still better in the HDR, same as all other lenses, unlike the blown-out highlights of the 17 Pro Max in some cases. When it comes to the details, the 10 Pro XL has 5x optical zoom versus 4x on the other side. so technically the Pixel can zoom in further without losing any quality. What I found is in some scenarios the 24 and 48 megapixel photos of the iPhone are slightly sharper than the 12 and 50 megapixel photos of the 10 Pro XL. While in other photos the iPhone goes back again to its over-sharpening behavior, same as all other lenses. At first it feels like the iPhone has more details, but this over-sharpened look ruins the image in my opinion. So if you have no issues with this over-sharpened look that happens sometimes, the iPhone gives you more details. Overall, in the details I will call it a draw as it depends on the scene. Sometimes the Pixel is better, while in other scenarios the iPhone is better. Till this point, the Pixel's telephoto has better HDR than the iPhone, and it's a draw between the two in the details. So the Pixel win for the third time. So let's try higher zoom levels to see if things will change. Starting with the optical quality 8x of the 17 Pro Max versus the Pixel, at this zoom level the iPhone captures 12 megapixel photos while the Pixel can take 12 and 50. The 8x version of the iPhone is much better when both are set to 12 megapixel. In the first shot there is a slight edge to the iPhone, but in the second one it's a day and night difference. The iPhone's image looks a lot more detailed. Switching to the 50 megapixel mode on the 10 Pro XL, it blurs the image and makes things worse. I'm really impressed by the 8x optical quality zoom of the 17 Pro Max. But the 10 Pro XL has its own tricks too, which is the AI-enhanced ProRes zoom that only works at 30x plus photos, and it doesn't support high-res photos same as the iPhone, so let's see if it can beat it at higher zoom levels. As you see, the Pixel's ProRes feature saturates the colors, which is something you will see in all photos taken with this feature. However, it's certainly a lot sharper than the 17 Pro Max's image. Here's another example that shows the same differences. The AI did a great job in adding extra details without faking the shot, except for the colors that don't look realistic. I also tried both at 40x, which is the maximum zoom level on the iPhone, and here are the results. The Pixel is still sharper than the iPhone by a good margin. The 10 Pro XL ProRes zoom is impressive in situations like this, which don't include text or people. Not only this, but it can reach up to 100x, and here is how it looks. As you see, it's a day and night difference. So in the zoom, the win goes to the 10 Pro XL for having a bigger range and sharper 30x plus photos, while the 17 Pro Max did win the details at the 8x zoom level. Now let's talk about the portraits, and here are the most important highlights. The 10 Pro XL got 3 improvements over its predecessor: the better subject isolation, the proper 1x portraits instead of 1.5x, and the new 50 megapixel mode. However, it still lacks the telephoto portraits. On the other hand, the 17 Pro Max supports the main and telephoto. It can take 24 megapixel portraits using both lenses, while at 2x it's limited to 12 megapixel. So let's see which one takes better portraits. Starting with the 1x at 24 megapixel on the iPhone and the 12 on the 10 Pro XL, both photos taken from the same exact spot on the same tripod. The first difference is the Pixel adds more contrast and makes my skin tone more red when compared to the iPhone. I personally prefer the iPhone colors, but both look amazing. The other thing I noticed is my face looks slimmer in the iPhone's shot, while the Pixel handled it better. This could be related to the different focal length of both cameras. In the subject isolation, the iPhone showed more errors. One at my arm, another one around my shoulder, and it blurred the bottom half of my right ear, while the Pixel had one tiny error around my hair. I thought at first that it didn't blur the gap at my right arm, but it certainly did. So the Pixel's subject isolation is better in this shot. Looking at the details, the iPhone smoothed out my skin and t-shirt to make things look more pleasing, while the Pixel keep things as they are. But the iPhone is a tiny bit sharper overall thanks to the default 24 megapixel resolution. I took the same shot once more after activating the 50 megapixel mode on the 10 Pro XL and compared it to the 24 megapixel version of the iPhone. In this scenario, the Pixel image becomes noticeably darker, which I don't like. On the other hand, the details are so much better. Now it beats the iPhone, plus I still prefer my face shape in the Pixel shot, and the subject isolation still goes to the Pixel. So in the 1x portraits, both have their own pros and cons. The iPhone has a higher default resolution, while the Pixel can go all the way up to 50 megapixel. The iPhone is better in handling my skin tone and colors, while the Pixel has less distorted face showing the proper dimensions and better subject isolation. So the only thing that makes you choose one over the other is the overall look, and in this case, I will call it a draw. Switching to 2x, I still prefer the iPhone colors. They look more accurate, same as the 1x shot. And for the second time, the Pixel had better subject isolation. When you look at my left ear, you will see that the iPhone didn't isolate it properly while the Pixel did. Another issue with the iPhone photo is the blurred t-shirt. Not sure why it did that as my face looks sharp, but it could be a one-time thing. Details-wise, the Pixel image looks sharper, but it softened my skin quite a bit. Plus, none of them distorted my face shape this time, which is nice. To me, it's another draw as the Pixel was better in the subject isolation and details, while the iPhone was better in the colors and the skin tone. It's also worth mentioning that the 50 megapixel mode of the 10 Pro XL at this zoom level added a lot more details for sure, but it did soften my skin a bit too much. But this is something extra that you can ignore and stick to the 12 megapixel mode that matches the iPhone anyways, so this doesn't make the Pixel lose. Lastly, the iPhone makes your life easier for taking portraits using the telephoto, while on the Pixel you have to take a normal shot first and then apply the blur effect in Google Photos, which I did. That already gives the edge to the iPhone, but let's compare the photos anyways. I personally like the 5x focal length over the new 4x of the 17 Pro Max. It's just my personal taste, but the iPhone nailed the colors while the Pixel added too much contrast and my skin tone is too red. When it comes to subject isolation, it doesn't make sense to compare both as I added it in post using Google Photos on the Pixel, but either way the iPhone did a lot better in this area. Google Photos messed up the areas around my hair and ears. The only thing that the Pixel did better is the details. The image looks a lot sharper when compared to the iPhone. Unfortunately, I don't have a 50 megapixel version of this shot as I found later that the Pixel used the main camera to capture this 50 megapixel photo for some unknown reason, and it doesn't look great either because it's a digital crop, so I will skip this one. Overall, the iPhone wins the telephoto portraits by far. It's easier for being natively supported in the camera app, it has more accurate colors and great subject isolation, while the Pixel was only better in the details. Lastly, I wanted to show you how both look in a totally different environment. The 10 Pro XL nailed the colors and skin tone at 1x while the iPhone's image was too yellow. At 2 and 5x, the Pixel was a lot brighter than the iPhone. I personally prefer the brighter look of the Pixel in this scenario, but I appreciate how more consistent is the iPhone. Regardless of the environment, it keeps the same characteristics, while the Pixel is unexpected in how it will process each photo, which is something you need to keep in mind. So in portraits, the overall win goes to the iPhone. Now it's time to talk about the front camera. The 17 Pro Max got a big upgrade this year. It has a higher resolution of 18 megapixel up from the 12 megapixel of last year, but lower than the 42 megapixel selfie of the 10 Pro XL. It has a wider field of view equivalent to a 20mm lens versus 23mm on the 16 Pro Max, but narrower than the 17mm lens of the 10 Pro XL. And the bigger upgrade this year is the new square sensor. This will allow you to take portrait or landscape selfies without rotating the phone, which makes it easier to hold. Your eyes will be properly centered when you look at the camera, and instead of being slightly shifted when you hold your phone in landscape orientation. Plus, it keeps most of your arms out of the frame when you take ultra-wide shots. Additionally, it supports Apple's center stage feature. So you can activate the auto zoom and auto rotate, which will automatically frame the shot based on what it sees in the frame. Here's a quick side-by-side comparison between the landscape orientation on both phones. You can see how much better is the framing in the iPhone's shot, which gives it the edge over the 10 Pro XL in this area. So let's compare the photos' quality. You'll immediately notice how the 17 Pro Max mutes the colors and the 10 Pro XL does exactly the opposite most of the time, while the reality is somewhere in between. It depends on your personal taste which approach you prefer, but the iPhone is closer to reality. Besides this, the Pixel has the widest field of view. In the resolution, the iPhone wins as it produces 18 megapixel photos, while the Pixel's output is 10 megapixel, and that's why the 17 Pro Max's image is sharper. In the HDR, both look identical in normal conditions, but when the sun is behind me, the 10 Pro XL is better in keeping things under control. So overall, I will call it a draw. The 17 Pro Max has better details and more flexibility in switching between orientations, while the 10 Pro XL has a wider field of view and better HDR performance. When it comes to the selfie portraits, the iPhone is noticeably better in the subject isolation. The Pixel blurred my right ear, a small part of my glasses and beard, which is not the case on the other side. In the details, even though the iPhone resolution drops all the way down from 18 to 7 megapixel, it's still sharper than the 10 megapixels of the 10 Pro XL. Another thing you lose with the iPhone is the ultra-wide portraits, while the Pixel can still do this. So overall, the 17 Pro Max wins in this comparison for its better details and subject isolation, while the Pixel is only better in the field of view. By this, I'm done with the morning comparison. Now let's compare the night photos. Back to the ultra-wide, the 10 Pro XL is better than the 17 Pro Max in certain areas. The most notable one is the less noise and better details. It's not a one-time thing, but that's the case in every single photo. Keep in mind that none of them has the night mode activated, and despite the lower resolution of the pixel, it delivers the best results. Even in high-res photos, the 10 Pro XL is way better than the 17 Pro Max that produces more noise and worse details. I'm really impressed by the results of the 10 Pro XL at night. The second thing that the Pixel does better is the more true-to-life look. The iPhone tends to darken the shadows more with an inaccurate white balance, plus the Pixel keeps the same look regardless the resolution, while the iPhone darkens the image even further at 48 megapixels. On the other hand, the iPhone is better in keeping the bright lights under control in some scenarios, while sometimes they look blown out in the 10 Pro XL photos, and that's the case at all resolutions. So in the night ultra-wide photos, the win goes to the Pixel hands down, as it produces more detailed and cleaner images with an accurate white balance, while the 17 Pro Max was only better in handling the bright lights. Switching to the main camera, the 17 Pro Max images improved quite a lot in the details and noise, but still not as good as the 10 Pro XL in most cases. The Pixel produces more details and less noise despite its lower default 12 megapixel resolution versus the 24 megapixel on the iPhone. And in the high-res photos, the gap is even bigger. The 10 Pro XL photos are way better in the details and noise. I didn't expect the 17 Pro Max to perform that much worse in the main camera comparison. Not only this, but the iPhone no longer has the edge over the Pixel in handling the bright lights like it did in the ultra-wide comparison. It's either slightly worse like in this shot, or better in other cases. So it's a draw between the two. In the color accuracy, each one had its own pros and cons based on the scenario. For example, the Pixel did better in those two photos. The colors, exposure, and white balance are on point, while the iPhone did better in other scenarios. In this one, none of them picked the right color, but the iPhone was closer to reality. And in this scenario, the iPhone rendered the purple color properly, while the Pixel made it more like a blue color. So I will call it a draw as each one did handle certain situations better than the other, but overall the Pixel wins in the main camera comparison as it produced better details and less noise either at the default or high resolution, while it was a draw in the color accuracy and handling the bright lights. So what about the 2x optical quality zoom? As I mentioned before, the iPhone is limited to 12 megapixel in this mode, so when I match both, the iPhone produces more details. The text is more readable, plus the patterns of the building walls are more visible. On the other hand, the iPhone still suffers from the high noise level as usual, while the Pixel cleans the image quite well. One more thing the Pixel can do is the ability to take 50 megapixel photos at 2x while the iPhone can't. In this case, the Pixel wipes the floor with the iPhone in everything. Look at the amount of details coming out of the 10 Pro XL. The text is more readable, zero noise, and everything else is a lot sharper. That gives the overall win to the Pixel. It's simply because I have the option to take high-res photos at 2x, and in this case the quality is way better. Now it's time to talk about the telephoto lens. In the first shot, the iPhone has the edge in producing a lot less noise, especially when you look at the sky, plus it was better in handling the brightest light in the image. On the other hand, the Pixel did better in picking the actual color of the lighthouse with more details than the iPhone. The high-res mode didn't work well for both. The iPhone started to show noise in the sky same as the Pixel, while the Pixel messed up the contrast. It brightened up the shadows a bit too much, so the image looks flat. In the details, the Pixel is still better, but both are worse than their lower resolution counterparts, so it's a draw in the first shot as each one has its own pros and cons. Here's a more common scenario with no fancy lights. The Pixel did handle the tree's exposure better than the iPhone, while the iPhone did better in handling the restaurant sign. So it's a draw between the two. In contrast, the iPhone produced more noise while the details are very similar, so the Pixel wins this one for its cleaner image. Switching to the high-res mode, the differences are exactly the same in the HDR, so it's a draw once more. The Pixel produced a noisy image this time, same as the iPhone, but it has the edge in the details. So overall, in the second scenario, the win goes to the Pixel for having better details in the high-res mode and less noise at the default resolution, so that gives the overall win to the Pixel in the telephoto comparison. But we still have more zoom levels to compare. Starting with the 8x optical quality zoom of the 17 Pro Max versus the Pixel, the iPhone won this comparison in morning photos, but I was shocked by the night results. The photos came out too grainy, washed out, and lacks contrast. The Pixel produced a noisy image too, but it was much better in anything else, so it takes the win hands down. I tried another shot to confirm my observations, and in this one the iPhone did better in handling the bright lights as usual and clearing the noise. But the image still looks washed out and lacks a lot of details that I can see in the 10 Pro XL's shot. So it's a draw in the second scenario, with the overall win going to the Pixel at this zoom level for winning in the first scenario. Not to mention that the Pixel crushes the iPhone at 30x or higher as it did in morning photos thanks to the AI ProRes zoom that did an impressive job at night in all the photos I tried it with. Plus it can go up to 100x and the images don't look fake. I tried it with objects, buildings and text. In all scenarios, it did handle the situation a lot better than the 17 Pro Max in every way, so the overall zoom goes to the 10 Pro XL by a huge margin. Now it's time for portraits. Here's the first shot at 1x with the default resolutions. Colors-wise, the Pixel is more accurate. This area has warm lights while the iPhone decided to make the scene a lot cooler. Another issue with the iPhone is the noisy sky, unlike the Pixel that produced a cleaner image. In the subject isolation, the iPhone did slightly better, especially around my ears. In the details, the iPhone shows more details, which I can see when I look at my hair and beard. So overall, I will call it a draw. The iPhone had better subject isolation and details, while the Pixel produced more accurate colors and a cleaner image with less noise. Switching to 50 megapixel on the 10 Pro XL, it keeps the same overall look, but slightly brighter than the 12 megapixel version, which should be the opposite. Not only this, but the subject isolation improved to match the iPhone, plus it surpassed it in the details, in addition to the less noisy sky, same as the previous shot. To me, the 10 Pro XL portrait looks perfect and it's certainly the winner this time. So in 1x portraits, the overall win goes to the Pixel for winning one photo and it was a draw in the other one. Moving to 2x portraits, nothing changed. The Pixel still has the more true-to-life colors, less noise in the background, while the iPhone has better details and subject isolation around my hair and ears, so it's another draw. With the 50 megapixel mode on the 10 Pro XL, the details improved, but it made the image a bit too soft at this zoom level, while the iPhone details look a lot more natural. I will also call it a draw as the high-res mode didn't help the Pixel to win this time because of its too soft image. Overall, they are still equal in their pros and cons, so in the 2x portraits, it depends on your personal taste which one you prefer in terms of the overall look. I personally lean more towards the Pixel image for its better colors, while the iPhone image looks too blue and washed out. Lastly, the iPhone supports telephoto portraits, while the Pixel can go up to 3x digital crop. At the default resolutions, the Pixel's image was a complete over-sharpening mess, even though the iPhone's image is too soft and noisy, but it's certainly the better option in this case. Switching to 50 megapixel mode on the 10 Pro XL, the quality improved a lot, and it's now comparable to the 17 Pro Max that still has the better details and subject isolation, but it's not the best in the colors and noise, so I think it's a draw in this one, but the overall win goes to the iPhone for winning the first shot. I also tried to take a normal 5x photo on the Pixel to add the blur effect in post. In this scenario, the image quality was a lot worse than the iPhone. The image was over-sharpened with a lot of noise. Not to mention that the 50 megapixel version was completely unusable, so the best option for the Pixel at night is to use the 3x portraits at 50 megapixel rather than taking a normal 5x photo and convert it to a portrait in post. And by this, the win goes to the iPhone at higher zoom levels. To sum up, the Pixel was better at 1x, it was a draw at 2x, and the iPhone was better at 4x, which is the closest to the 3 and 5x of the Pixel. Now it's time to compare the front camera. In good ambient lighting without using the night mode, the Pixel showed some noise in the sky, while the 17 Pro Max did handle it better. In contrast, the Pixel kept the highlights under control, unlike the blown-out look of the iPhone. Details-wise, the Pixel has a slight edge despite its lower resolution, but both are very comparable. Lastly, the Pixel has a slightly wider field of view, so the overall win goes to the Pixel for having more advantages. I tried another scenario in a darker area to trigger the night mode of each phone. That drops the iPhone resolution to 12 megapixel, and here the 10 Pro XL impressed me in everything. The iPhone has a lot of noise in the sky with blown out highlights, while the Pixel did so much better, plus it kept the night look of the image unlike the overexposed shadows of the iPhone. Not to mention that the Pixel produced way better details, so it wiped the floor with the iPhone in this shot. Not to mention that at 1x zoom, the iPhone's resolution drops even further to 7 megapixel with a narrower field of view, while the Pixel remains consistent at all levels. Switching to portraits, the iPhone is once more limited to 7 megapixel photos at 1x, so let's match the zoom level for the sake of this comparison. Right off the bat, the iPhone is a lot better in the subject isolation. The Pixel didn't blur the whole top area, plus it couldn't isolate my glasses and right ear properly, while the iPhone did all of this correctly. In contrast, the Pixel wins in the details and less noise, plus it can go wider than the iPhone. To me, the Pixel has the higher quality and more flexibility, but the big difference in the subject isolation ruined the image, and there is no way for me to fix this, so the iPhone is the winner here. In dark areas, the Pixel gives you the option to use night sight, which is not supported on the iPhone in portrait mode. That gives a huge advantage to the Pixel when it comes to the details and the overall quality. I look like a ghost in the iPhone shot, but unfortunately the Pixel still struggles with the subject isolation with a lot of errors, plus it overexposed the highlights in the background. But if I'm gonna pick one, I will certainly go for the Pixel, as I look too bad in the iPhone shot and there is no way for me to fix it. You can improve things on the iPhone by using the front camera flash. Even in this scenario, the Pixel produces the highest quality photo by far. Yet the messed up subject isolation around my head is the only drawback. So you are the judge which one you would go for. I personally would go for the Pixel. Overall, in the night selfies, the Pixel produced the highest quality photos, but the subject isolation in portraits is the only drawback. So it deserves the win, but Google needs to fix this issue ASAP like it did with the back camera. Lastly, I kept all the special features till the end. The first one to compare is the macros. I didn't use the 50 megapixel mode of the 10 Pro XL as I found it to produce blurry and dark images, so I will stick to the 12 megapixel resolution on both. In morning photos, I found that the Pixel is always better in handling the colors and contrast, while the iPhone is inconsistent. Sometimes the images are too bright, while in other cases it's darker than what it should be. Other than this, both are about the same in the details and focus. In contrast, at night the iPhone produces blurry and washed out images all the time. So the Pixel crushed it at night with much more details, less noise and better colors, so the overall win in this category goes to the 10 Pro XL. Next, the panorama shots. In the morning the iPhone colors are too washed out, the Pixel is not perfect but closer to reality, and in the details both are about the same. On the other hand, the 17 Pro Max did better in stitching the images together. In this one, the Pixel had two big errors, even though I made sure to perfectly rotate the phone as I possibly can. So the win goes to the iPhone as the colors can be adjusted in post, while these errors are unfixable. But at night, it's a whole different story. The Pixel crushed the iPhone in every single way thanks to the night sight support in panorama shots. The 10 Pro XL produced such a beautiful image, while the iPhone's shot is simply unusable in comparison. Not to mention that the Pixel has a much bigger suite of features that don't exist on the other side, like Action Pan that can take some beautiful action shots day and night. We have the Add Me feature, which allows you to take your group shots without asking a stranger for help. I always use this feature in family gatherings, and it works really well. Camera Coach is another new addition this year for those who need help in taking better photos. It analyzes the scene to give you different framing options, and once you pick the one you like, it takes you through a step-by-step guide to reach the same outcome. We have Best Take that magically allows you to swap faces when you take multiple photos back-to-back to make sure everyone look their best in group shots, and more. By this, I'm done with the comparison, and to me the 10 Pro XL is simply the best smartphone camera for photos. It won the 17 Pro Max 90% of the time, plus it offers way more features that takes your experience to a whole new level. So I can confidently say that the 10 Pro XL is the Photos King in 2025. Stay tuned for my upcoming video comparison between the same phones, but for now, thanks so much for watching and see you in the next video.